Time.
Knife crime is in the headlines again. Is there any way to stop it? And what about HS2? Is it ever going to actually happen? People here are pretty exercised about that. In Sale, in Greater Manchester, near where the railway is supposed to go, Sale's two constituencies are firmly divided politically. The West has been solidly Conservative, to the East, Labour. But our audience here, as always, reflects the broad electoral map of the country as a whole. Welcome to Question Time. The government, Mark Spencer, Minister for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA. He spent nearly 3 years as then Prime Minister Boris Johnson's political enforcer, or party chief whip, and he's the MP for Sherwood, a seat he took from Labour in 2010. Labour's new shadow Cabinet Minister for International Development is Lisa Nandy. She's in her 14th year as MP for Wigan. In that time, she shadowed the Foreign Secretary, Energy and Levelling Up briefs. Wendy Chamberlain is the enforcer of party discipline among the Liberal Democrats, 15 MPs. Chief Whip is one of 3 jobs she has, alongside work and pensions and being a deputy leader in Scotland. The MP for North East Fife was previously a police officer for 12 years. Tim Montgomerie is a Conservative thinker and influencer, a speechwriter for former leaders William Hague and Ian Duncan Smith. He also created the independent online magazine of the Tory faithful, Conservative Home. Now he contributes to Times Radio, Talk TV and the Centre for Social Justice. And Henri Murison calls himself a proud Northerner. He's also Chief Executive of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, the voice of business and civic leaders, which seeks to improve the prospects and quality of life for people in Northern England. Before that, he was a Labour councillor. Welcome to our panel, welcome to our audience here in Sale, and of course welcome to you at home. Do join in the conversation on social media, and we're also available as a podcast on BBC Sounds after the programme. Now, as always, the panel do not know what the questions will be, though I'm sure they'd like to. But tough luck. So let's hear our first one, which is from Grace Booth.
As a teenager, it is increasingly worrying that there seems to be an increase in teenagers being killed by other teenagers. What can be done to prevent this and increase our safety in public?
So, Grace, I'm assuming that what has made you ask this question is the absolutely tragic death of 15-year-old Eliane and schoolgirl in Croydon, who was just on her way to school and was stabbed to death. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested, but no one has been charged. I did look into the figures about whether more teenagers are being killed by teenagers. It's proving impossible, as far as I can see, to pin that down. But from what I can see, knife crime is generally on the increase. What are your feelings about it?
I feel like when you're a teenager, sometimes you don't necessarily have children of your own or as many. You don't know what it's like to possibly lose a loved one as much as a mother, a grandparent could. And this isn't the main cause for it, of course, but being a teenager in society, sometimes it can be scary when you're quite vulnerable, especially as a woman. Sometimes I just feel like a bit unprotected, and there's a lot of knife crime, and it's quite easy to carry around a knife. So how can you prevent knife crime? It's a hard one to prevent.
And how old are you, Grace?
I'm 16.
16, and you're worrying. Lisa?
Well, I mean, first of all, thanks for asking the question, because I think watching the news unfold over the last 24 hours, it's obviously a tragedy for this girl, this young girl who's lost her life, for the family, for the community in which she lived, but it's also a tragedy for this whole country, because this is a national problem. We've got here in the Greater Manchester, where I'm an MP, we've got serious problems of kids being groomed and recruited to run drugs across county lines. It ruins lives from a really, really young age. They're targeting kids as young as 8, 9, 10 years old, these criminal gangs, and they're getting away with it.
So what can be done to make Grace feel safer?
So we need a national strategy to grip the problem. It has to start with coming down like a ton of bricks on the people who are doing this. We need more police on the streets investigating these crimes. We need tougher penalties for the disgusting human beings who are grooming these children and recruiting them into criminal gangs. But we also need to deal with the other side as well. I'm really disturbed by how, when the child protection charities talk to me and to other members of Parliament, how often they say that young people, particularly boys, just aren't aware of the consequences of what it can mean of carrying and using a knife. We need to be in all the spaces where these young people are. We need to have youth workers back in A&E departments and in custody cells. We need to bring mental health workers back into schools, and we need to really up those campaigns of people who've suffered the absolute tragedy of knife crime to go into schools and explain to young people from a very early age what it means. It needs a comprehensive national strategy to get a grip on this problem. We've failed a generation of young people, and it's incumbent on our generation to step up and get this right.
So, Mark, Grace wants answers, and she wants to feel safer. What can be done to prevent the kind of crime that we saw in Croydon yesterday?
Yeah, so I mean, as a parent, I share your concern. I think clearly the events of this week are very shocking, and you send your kids off to school, you expect them to be safe. And I can roll off statistics which tell you actually knife crime has reduced since 2019, but that is of little comfort to.
But it's gone up. It's gone up if you look since 2010, for example.
Well, and I think.
I mean, we can trade statistics, but ultimately,
that's right.
You've got Grace here saying she doesn't feel safe.
That's right, and of course the consequence of that is that the young people don't feel safe, and so they carry a knife, and you're actually statistically more likely to be killed with a knife that you carried than with one that somebody else carried. So we've got to give confidence to those young people that those people being caught with a knife will receive very harsh sentences, and that's what we're doing. You're highly likely to be sent to prison if you are caught with a knife. The police have taken over 100,000 knives off people in the last 3 years. So that is working, and if you are sent to court to face the charge of that crime, you are likely to be sent to jail. And that's what we need to do. We need to give the police the powers to be able to enforce the legislation that's there. We have to make sure the courts are delivering upon that.
So there are 10 banned knives or blades banned in the UK. This is as a result of the government. So I just went online today to see what I could buy. So have a look at this knife. This is a zombie knife, which I could have bought for, it was quite expensive, 45 quid, but I could have bought that. No questions asked. It's nearly 2 foot long. So I thought, those knives are supposed to be banned, so how come one can still buy them?
So, I mean, obviously it's very difficult to police the internet and very difficult to stop people buying those weapons.
And this wasn't the dark web, this was just,
But OK, so a zombie knife isn't a very offensive weapon, but it doesn't stop someone going to Sainsbury's and buying a kitchen knife, which is equally as dangerous and could kill somebody. So it's not necessarily about the weapons, it's more about the individuals and their motivation.
So what's the answer? You said
so I think you would give the police the powers to go and make sure that they can intervene in these areas. We've got to try and get involved in youth groups and make sure we educate and we try and support people and encourage them not to carry knives themselves. We are throwing everything at it that we can, and it needs politicians up and down the country to step up and do their bit. And in London, knife crime has gone up under Sadiq Khan.
Please don't politic about this.
But hang
on. You've also been in government for 13 years, so
which is why we're introduced, which is why we've done the extra 20,000 police officers and given the individual coppers those powers to go and intervene. That's what
You're getting a groan from the audience here. So let's hear from the audience. There's lots of hands up. So the woman in the glasses back there.
Where are the parents in all this? Why don't they know where their children are, and why aren't they held more accountable?
OK. Man, just in front of you, yes.
I've worked with young people since 1985, so I've seen a systematic change in the way that young people and adults interact. Mark, I have to say, please stop using statistics to defend the undefensible. You've stripped local government of youth services. You've taken responsibility away from councils that had proper youth provisions that the communities were a part of. I've grown up in Manchester, I'm nearly 60, so they had MAGs, which is the multi-agency gang. When Mossad was going crazy, they had community members, they had youth workers, they had social workers, they had a whole range of professionals and people involved in the community. And the community could police themselves. But the Conservative government, through austerity and these give police back the powers. You had community policemen who knew the community, who knew the people, but you're ramping up powers and you're forgetting people. It's people, and all you're interested in is the law and punishment. Whereas if you talk to people, I've been into jail with young people that are in jail, and you talk to them as a human being and you show them the consequences of their actions. Even in gang culture, there's rules, there's regulations, but you just don't see that and you don't hear that because, one, it doesn't touch your life, and two, it's a party political vote and a game. So stop playing politics with people's lives, because you'll say tomorrow, oh, no, you do. You've done it systematically. And you do this every time somebody passes away, somebody's killed. But you've created the environment.
Okay, well, let's let him respond. Mark, do you want to respond to that?
I mean, I think it touches everybody's lives. Nobody could be not affected by watching that on the news. Any parent who watches that clearly feels that emotion and the horror at being put into that situation.
And what about the criticism specifically that you're making?
But I think then, so you criticise me for rolling out those statistics and saying that we're not doing as much community policing. But when I say that we are recruiting more police officers and have done, then you know,
and
the audience reacted
services
negatively.
that he mentioned?
But so I think, you know, we need to throw everything at this. I accept that argument. So we have to throw all the powers that we have, and that includes giving the police more powers, recruiting more police officers, working with local authorities. We're all on the same side here. We all want to reduce this problem, and we want to try and address that to keep kids safe.
Wendy, let me bring you in here, because you were a copper for, was it 12 years?
Yep.
So what's your perspective on this? Is that the answer, as Mark's saying? More police, more police?
So I think the issue is police doing the right things. But I think there's two aspects of Grace's initial question. But I'd also, what the gentleman said there, my father was a police officer as well for a bit longer than me, 33 years. And I remember, you know, not only did the community know him, but really importantly, he knew them. So from an intelligence perspective, he had that information. And simply put, there aren't police officers doing the job that my father did back then. But in terms of Grace's original question, I think trust in policing is definitely been eroded over the last few years. I'm sure we can all think of the examples that exemplifies that for us. So if young people don't trust the police and don't trust the police to keep them safe, they will make tragic or make decisions with tragic consequences. I'd also point to Violence Reduction Unit in Glasgow, which has done a huge amount of work to reduce knife crime. I'd like to see the government in Westminster looking at those kind of solutions, because what we have seen today is a symptom rather than the cause, because it's usually very complex. Families are broken, there's issues there, it's a complex picture. But the other bit I want to pick up on about this specific murder, and I think the reason why it has struck with so many of us, is because it's a young girl, and it's a young girl who's come to the assistance of her friend, but been approached by a young man, supposedly for romantic reasons. And sadly, I think we're back to the violence against women and girls, misogynistic.
I mean, obviously, there are a lot of things. I just have to say, no one has been trying. There are a lot of facts we don't know about this yet. So you're reading stuff in the papers, you don't actually know the facts of this case.
Yes, no, and I absolutely accept that. But I think that's why that has struck so deeply in relation to the reason why we're talking about it this evening. Again, it's women who are feeling vulnerable. A sixth of young men think Andrew Tate's ideas are a good thing. We need to be engaging with our young people as parents in terms of what they're accessing, what they're looking at, and ensuring that we're having the right conversations as well.
OK. The man in the white T-shirt at the back there.
So I think looking at it from a policing perspective is very one-dimensional.
Absolutely.
And what you'll end up with as an answer to that question is basically more young people in prison or whoever carries knives, which is not necessarily benefit to them or anything. You need to go back to the grassroots and you need to go back to the community, like that gentleman down there was talking about. And that's the only way you're going to actually solve the problem. You can't just keep adding extra laws and laws and laws. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Over the last 10, 15 years, the number of knife crime is exploded. It's ridiculous, and you need to go back to the the community side of it rather than look at it from a legal perspective, because that's definitely not working.
OK, the woman there in the glasses.
Hiya. I think as a teacher we do so much in school about preventing knife crime. I think what's really important is to focus on, like Scotland, as a public health issue. I think the big thing
what you're talking about in Scotland is the Violence Reduction Unit.
Yes.
And just to explain for those who are not aware, back in 2005, 2004, Glasgow was the murder capital of Europe, I think. And they have dramatically they've halved, I think, the number of murders there, and they've treated it as a public health issue as much as a crime issue. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah, and basically I think we need to look at knife crime we need to dig down into some of the reasons. Yeah, a lot of kids are carrying knives. Why are they carrying knives? What are we doing about addressing poverty and the reasons in our communities? What are we doing in, the adverse situations that these students are in, that these children are in? Generational poverty and things that happen. What are we doing about it? Because there's a lot of talk at the moment about what we can do. There's knives and it's a girl. And it's really what we should be focusing on is, why is this child got a knife in the first place? Why do they feel unsafe? We need to dig down into that.
OK. Henry?
So, the Commission on Young Lives came out with some really worrying kind of stats about the scale of this problem, and it's all linked together, right? So here, where we are in Sale, a quarter of kids on free school meals are missing school regularly. They're persistently absent, and that's significantly higher than the average in this area. And the same's across the country. And that public health approach is the right one, right? So in Northumbria, there's a violence reduction unit that's focused a lot on violence against women and girls. And I would say I was with Sadiq yesterday. On his way back to London, he rushed back when this crime was reported. And I do challenge what Mark said, because I think that the approach that Sadiq has taken of working with communities and investing money in those preventative services is the right way. We cannot police our way out of this. Once kids have got the knives, there's very little other than searching every child on every bus in any city centre or any neighbourhood that you can do about it. You've got to get them to not want a knife in the first place. And what the gentleman at the front was saying, I think it comes back to Grace's original question, that our focus should be on you and making you and your friends feel safe. And what we need to do is worry about that. And actually, how much the police can do to stop people once they're carrying knives is always going to be limited. They're always going to miss someone. And what we've got to do is protect people like you from your friends, from people you know, and make sure that they are not taking the wrong choices. And we have to make those decisions now to invest to stop this.
And here in the front.
Yes, good evening. I was a police officer for 33 years in London, and Theresa May, for example, took 20,000 more experienced police officers off the street. That was a disgrace. The trouble is now, we need more police officers, not community support officers, with due respect, they're doing a great job. We need more trained, experienced police officers to get in the communities and get the information so that it can be acted upon.
Tim?
I completely agree with the gentleman there about the importance of youth services and the consequences that there have been of cuts in them. For the teacher and the top there, teachers shouldn't be expected to be picking up the social consequences of family breakdown, of the kind of parental problems that we see, the family decline in our country in recent years. But we have an immediate crisis at the moment. Yes, we have to tackle the causes of social breakdown, but this issue of policing, I think, is the one we have to focus on just at the moment. You go into shops at the moment and we're seeing these stories of people steaming through shops, clearing shelves, almost without consequence. People evading fares on trains and buses, charging through the ticket barriers. People are beginning to fear and feel that there are no consequences for bad behaviour. And they say, don't they, that in London you're only a few yards away from a rat. Well, it's also been said that actually children on buses in London feel they're only a few yards away from a knife. And if you feel that, you're going to start wanting to carry a knife yourself to protect yourself. What we need, and this may be a controversial comment, this is, I think, another mistake that Theresa May made, was to reduce stop and search. What should be happening on buses in London, etc., is trained police officers should be going onto those buses and looking for knives. And until it becomes a frightening prospect for young people to be found with a knife on a bus, more and more people will carry them. I don't want young people, whatever, to end up in jail in large numbers. We deter it, though, by searching buses, having police profile on the streets. And long-term, yes, we need to sort out our social problems, But immediately we have a policing crisis, and we need an awful lot more police on the beat, on buses, in the visibility around schools, so that children can feel safe again.
OK. All right. I'm going to move on. So it was quite clear tonight when you came in and you submitted your questions, loads of you want to talk about this, and loads of you want to talk about the next subject, so I want to make sure I give it time. Before I do that, I just want to say, if you would like to be in our audience, it's good, isn't it? Yeah? If you'd like to be in our audience, go to our website where you can see a list of dates and future locations. Next week, we're in Wolverhampton. So if you live in Wolverhampton or around Wolverhampton, we would love to see you. So go to our website and you can apply and come along and be part of that. And the week after that, we're in London. And also, I just have to say, because it's a new thing question time, if you would like a picture of your area to appear here, because we like to show where we are. So obviously we're in Sale tonight, because otherwise this always looks the same. But we are moving around the country every week. If you would like to send us a picture, we will feature it here. So you email us your best shot at qtpictures@bbc.co.uk. I haven't learned that off pat yet, but I will, I promise, by next week. So there we go. Right, let's take our next question from Sam Shabir.
Hi. Is HS2 still worth it, or is it now a colossal waste of time and money?
What do you think, Sam?
If rumours are to be believed, because it is still a rumour, but I'm a believer in no smoke without fire, without it not coming to Manchester, I think, first of all, as a Northerner, I'm a little bit insulted, and I think it's a bit of a disgrace. And secondly, if that is the case, then yes, I do think it has been a waste of time and money. I look around and people are struggling to heat their homes, people are struggling with all the, food banks are record high levels. Could that money have not been used in other areas of society today where we're seeing a lot of poverty and things like that? So that's my view on it.
So come on, Mark, put Sam and many others out of their misery. Are you going to build HS2 or not?
So we are building HS2. HS2 is being built as we speak. There are diggers.
Yes, but are you going to build it to Manchester and beyond? Yes, we heard the Prime Minister say that, I think it's 30-odd times this morning on his regional news round.
So it is being built. So,
yes, but you know what the question is. Is it going to be built to Manchester and beyond?
So let's be serious. I mean, as you indicated, it's a huge amount of money. Any government worth its salt will, of course, continue to review these decisions and make sure that that is a good use of taxpayers' money. And that is what is happening at the moment. The Chancellor Exchequer is reviewing whether or not HS2 continues to be good value for money. And I think any credible government would continue. In the light of what's happened since the decision was made to build HS2, i.e. a global pandemic and a war in Ukraine, and the impact that's had on people's
costs are going up well up before then, as you know.
So there are, of course, those additional challenges which you've made reference to. So any government worth its salt surely should, on a regular basis, review that use of taxpayers' money or identify whether there is other things we can spend that cash on which would work better in northern communities. And I think we've been doing both. We've been investing in those northern communities and in those transport links across country as well. But the process that is happening is a review of whether it is still the right use of taxpayers' money. And I think that's what any credible government should do.
Well, let's just have a little potted history of HS2 for those who are not familiar. I know you all are around here, because even though it's was not going to stop at Sale, it obviously was going to stop here. So let's have a look. This is what HS2 originally was going to look like. We're going to show you an image. Here we go. So there was the eastern leg, which goes up to Leeds. That got canned. Then phase 2, going up beyond Manchester, that's now being reviewed, which leaves us with Birmingham, well, not quite to London Euston, because that's been delayed. So now it's Birmingham to Old Oak Common, which is a suburb of West London. That's definitely happening?
We are building that as we speak. As we sit here tonight,
that's definitely
happening. There are people working.
It's just
on
the
that
bit
line.
that goes to Manchester and beyond that's in question.
So
that's what you're saying. That's being reviewed.
It is being, but I think that's a credible thing to do.
OK, but I'm just checking where we are, because obviously it's changed quite a bit over the years, and we need to keep up. Henry.
So for 13 years, the government has come and said to people at election time, trust us to build this railway, it's a really good idea. And now the Prime Minister turns around and says, actually, maybe we don't need to build this railway. And the question you've got to ask yourselves is, were they right before or were they right now? And my reflection would be, and I think Sam's question is a really good one, which is that not everyone in this audience is going to love HS2. And I don't expect everyone to agree with me, but all I need you to do is disagree with the Prime Minister more. So what came up on the screen, they might be able to put it back on, the Old Oak to Birmingham Railway, literally will be no use to anyone in this room. It will just get people from West London to the centre of Birmingham. No one in the north of England will get any use out of it whatsoever. And the really kind of negative bit about this is it will also mean that Northern Powerhouse Rail, to get from Liverpool across to the northeast to Leeds, will have a big hole in it, because from Manchester Airport to Manchester Piccadilly, there'll be a big gap where there was supposed to be a railway. And when the Prime Minister was challenged about that on your local radio station this morning, I was listening in, screaming at the radio, as I'm sure some other people were, he refused to commit to building a new line across the Pennines still, and talked about potholes and buses. And I was with people in South Yorkshire yesterday on the radio saying they don't have any buses either, so I'm not sure what that's really about. And I think where it finishes, if you're a Prime Minister of a great nation, like Great Britain, surely you want to leave a legacy. If I was Prime Minister, I don't think I ever will be, but I would want to. And at the moment, it's going to be cancelling HS2 to anywhere where people really wanted it. It's very popular in cities like Manchester and Leeds. Cancelling Northern Powerhouse Rail, you won't be able to build it. No new hospitals, the ones that Boris promised haven't happened. And no rolling back on net zero. And it feels like anything that Boris Johnson touched, this Prime Minister wants rid of it, even though it's the stuff that actually this government was getting right. They're just throwing it all out in the street like it's not worth anything.
Just briefly, Henry, because you were there at the beginning of HS2 when Rishi Sunak was discussing it with Boris Johnson. And the impression you had at the time was Rishi Sunak was very keen on this idea.
So Rishi was particularly really focused on the new line across the Pennines, Northern Powerhouse Rail. And he convinced Boris to make it a centrepiece of his domestic platform. Boris came and stood in front of Stephenson's Rocket in Manchester and said, I will build this. And that's why this morning I was so upset, to be honest, because the point of it is that if you were going to take away HS2, then you would think, oh, well, there'll be something significant in place of it. But I don't think that'll happen either. I think what the government has decided is that actually they're not really interested in economic growth. Because up here, we earn £8,000 a year less than people in the south of England.
But are you saying
and that's because we're disconnected from each other.
Are you saying you'd build it no matter the cost?
I mean, I don't think we could do that. You can't do it no matter the cost. And no one is saying that. But what I would say is
that's
this
the government position.
That's
literally the government position, to look at value for money for the taxpayer.
But my response would be, Mark, that you have over-engineered it with tunnels that meant that Tory voters in the south wouldn't dislike it. Yeah. You have not been able, and you've delayed it in the last year and added £500 million to the cost. So I think we can come up with a credible plan to make it cheaper. That isn't the same as saying we're not going to take it to the same places. That's a completely different argument.
Lots of hands up. I want to hear from somebody. Woman there with the glasses.
Yeah, just to kind of echo Henry's point, when HS2 was first mooted, which was about 10 years ago, I remember going to the consultation in the middle of Manchester, and I think the point that I would like to make is that I think actually back then there wasn't this cost of living, there hadn't been a war in Ukraine, obviously. But I think the biggest insult is that even whether it gets built or not, the insult really is that Northerners weren't listened to. Yeah. The very people this was supposed to benefit, that wasn't built.
Man in the back.
I think if we'd started building from the north down to the south, we wouldn't be having this conversation, would we? There wouldn't be an issue. Okay.
The woman there in the green jacket.
Well, yes. I think it was easy. It was easy for HS2 to work between London and Birmingham, and it's just too tricky and a political hot potato. But we feel abandoned, and it's not right. We need to be brought along with everybody else in this country, and we're also taxpayers here in Greater Manchester, and it's our money too, which is going towards the building of HS2.
OK, let me hear one more thing. Yes, so the woman in the blue top there.
Has there ever been a proper consultation in the government where they actually said, listen, we're going to do Manchester to Birmingham, Manchester to Leeds, Manchester to York, rather than all this hoo-ha about London upwards? Why about not Manchester downwards? Has there ever been anybody consultation in the government that considered the taxpayers' money or anything like that?
Which is the point the other man was making. If you started from the north downwards, perhaps you might be in a different situation. So Lisa, where's Labour on this? Because I'm confused. So you've got two shadow cabinet ministers, one saying, this is last week, one saying on one day, we will build HS2 in full and we will build Northern Powerhouse Rail in full. The very next day, yet another shadow cabinet minister saying we need to see the full cost before we come to a decision. So which is it? You're going to build it, you're not going to build it?
Yeah, we want to see HS2 built. We've been consistent about that over a long period of time. The reason I want to see it built is not because it's quicker.
Just to be clear, that's Labour policy.
Yeah,
when you've got the Shadow Chief Secretary saying we're going to see the full cost. OK,
if it's all right. I mean, I will answer the question. I always answer the question on the show, which sometimes gets me into trouble, but I will answer the question. We want to see this built. There's no question about that. We've been consistent about that. We would have started in the north, not least because the biggest economic benefit of this line is the bit between Manchester and Birmingham, which is precisely the bit that Rishi Sunak is now talking about cancelling. I don't want to see it built because it's quicker to get to London. I don't give a stuff about that. I give a stuff about the fact that it takes 3 hours to get from Wigan to Newcastle, that it takes all day sometimes to get to Leeds because the trains don't turn up, that my constituents can't get home on time to read their kids a bedtime story, sometimes for years on end, because Manchester is completely clogged up, because the infrastructure that we've got was built in Victorian times, and unless we sort that out, the North will be condemned to this sort of misery, not just for decades, but as Andy Burnham said, for 50 or 100 years. That's what High Speed 2 was designed to solve, and instead what we've got is the absurd spectacle this week of a Prime Minister who has spent £25 billion of our money on this railway, now saying that a line that was supposed to go from London to the north is going to go neither to London or the north. It's ridiculous. That's why we're saying to the government, open up the books and tell us what the actual hole is that you've blown in the finances.
Because there's a suggestion it could cost up to 100 billion.
And this is the point, we don't know. The last projected costs of this that were published were done in 2019. Since then, Liz Truss crashed the economy and sent costs soaring through the roof. We've had a global inflation crisis as well. And we've also had a Prime Minister in Rishi Sunak who's dithered and delayed, and those delays alone are projected to cost about 300 million extra on the project. We want to know what the hole is in the budget. We want to know so we can fix it. We're committed to bringing our railways back in-house.
But hang on a second. It doesn't sound like... But hang on, it doesn't sound like you're committed. Not you personally, I'm saying. But if you've got the Shadow Chief Secretary to Treasury saying Labour needs to see the full cost before it comes to a decision...
I'm on your show, Fiona, and I'm telling you the answer. This is my backyard. It matters to me.
The HS2 will get built under Labour.
I am telling you that we are committed to bringing the railways back in-house. We're committed to public control over our buses, like Andy Burnham is doing here in Manchester, and we're committed to upgrading our infrastructure to solving this problem around Manchester so that Northern Powerhouse Rail works.
And committed to building HS2? I didn't hear that in the list.
No, we're committed to upgrading the infrastructure so we fix the actual problem it was designed to solve. Yes, we want to build High Speed 2, but the first thing we need to know from the Chancellor, from the Prime Minister, is open the books, come clean, tell us what the hole in the budget is so that we can fix this mess. We can't do it unless he comes clean, not just with us, but with the country as well. This isn't just a question of giving us the railways and the infrastructure that we deserve in the north of England. This is a basic question of giving us the respect that we deserve after 13 years of broken promises.
Tim.
I've never learnt to drive, so the way I get around the country is on public transport. And if you'd seen me ride a bicycle, you'd be very glad I'd never learnt to drive. But when in Salisbury, where I live, and travel up to London, the trains run pretty much on time most of the time. They're air-conditioned, the seats are pretty comfortable. And as I travel further north, it's almost like going from colour to black and white in terms of, the service. The trains get less reliable. The buses are older, there's no aircon in the heat of the summer, the platforms are more crowded. There is something absolutely desperate about the inequality in the infrastructure between different parts of our country. And let's not just think of it as a north-south thing either. The people often forgotten are people in the valleys of Wales or the rural area of Lincolnshire or, the Highlands of Scotland or whatever. I understood why we wanted to build HS2. But at some point, and this is why I'm glad that I'm a pundit rather than a politician, we have to decide, OK, we've lost a lot of money, it's been a national disgrace. Fiona, I think you just mentioned the cost could go as high as 100 billion. I've seen estimates even higher. And I don't know what Henri would say, but, we could be talking 120, 150 billion pounds. It's a brave politician that potentially cancels this project. But if we're talking about that kind of cost overrun, think what you could do with that money instead. That sort of money, you could build hospitals, new hospitals in every part of the north. You could build 500,000 council homes and address, rough sleeping and people living in bed and breakfast. You could refit every single school. We have to realise that, yes, this has been a debacle, but are we really potentially willing to throw away another £100 billion when we have other pressing needs, from broadband in rural areas to basic transport services? And so I'm glad I'm not Rishi Sunak on this occasion, but I think at least he's being honest that we need to face up and have a proper national debate about this. And I think probably the right judgment, in the interest of the North, the interest of the whole country, is that this white elephant of a project does actually now need to be scrapped.
OK. So it's interesting you've got some applause there, Tim, because from the questions that came in, there is a lot of support for HS2 in the room. There's clearly some people that don't think it should be built. So is that you, madam? You've just stuck your hand up.
I don't think it should be built. I've never thought it should be built. But, and I'm
And
going to read...
why is that?
Well, can I just read off a piece of paper? And I'm sorry, because I won't get it all right if I don't read it off.
OK.
In 2015, the House of Lords Select Committee, said the government at that time had yet to make a convincing argument for spending billions on HS2. They went on to say there was a strong case for building the northern leg of HS2 first. They said while they were supportive of investment in rail structure, they were not convinced that HS2 is the best way to deliver this investment. Why does nobody listen to these guys? Why do we have committees? Why do we have inquiries? Why do we have all these things? Why do people all that spend that time and money? And nobody listens to them. Please, why?
I think there are a lot of development companies who are poised to make an awful lot of profit out of this project. They lobby very hard, and I think there's quite a lot of corporate interests that have been behind why HS2 has been built in the way it is, and the experts have been ignored.
100%. At the end of the day, this country needs investment in our society. It's not about greed. It's not about people making money and shorting money on some kind of disaster and the pound's failing. Who are these guys? They've got it all in the Cayman Islands or wherever. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. We need to invest in society, whether it's knife crime or anything. Okay. Have you watched the BBC programmes, Joe Swash, Teens in Care? Have you watched the BBC series Parole? You will see why these things happen and why people go to prison and why people commit crimes. It's not rocket science. Invest in society, please.
Wendy. So, I'm reminding you of Sam's question, is HS2 worth it or a colossal waste of time and money?
Thanks. I mean, I picked up on Mark's initial point about making part of the business case here for not progressing is the war in Ukraine and COVID. But for me, the need for strategic infrastructure hasn't changed. And I'm very conscious that I'm in the north, so I suppose that means that I'm from beyond the wall. but when I say that, there is a case from a UK perspective for HS2 and that connectivity. It took me as long to get from Scotland here this evening. If I'd been coming on the East Coast main line, I'd probably have been about Peterborough in the same amount of time. So, the connectivity on the West is particularly bad. And I think we all know, despite the fact that Avanti's been re-awarded the contract, the West Coast capacity is appalling. So I think I agree with all the comments there in relation to building the north legs first. But I think the other...
But of course, one of your own MPs campaigned against HS2, as you know, in the Amersham and Chesham by-election. She said HS2 is a big no.
So
it's not a consistent message.
You're referencing Sarah Green in Chesham Amersham. I point out that Cheryl Gillan, who was the previous Conservative MP in Chesham Amersham, was also not supportive of the project because she was representing her constituents. But that,
of course, but you're talking for the Lib Dems tonight, and I just wonder if you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, because you've got your MP saying absolutely not, and you're saying no, we should definitely go ahead.
But she's representing her constituents' concerns, and isn't it even more of a betrayal if, given that the people in Buckinghamshire have gone through all the sort of pain, disruption, the damage to the children's, etc., and then the ultimate project to rebuild in the north and produce the infrastructure, it hasn't happened. So I think that is the point that I would want to make. And the other bit is Crossrail. Again, you've had in the South East a huge multi-million-pound infrastructure rail project delivered in the South East, and you feel abandoned and left behind.
OK. I'm going to take another question. So I want to try and get through a few more. For sure, we could talk about HS2 all evening. But I'm going to move on to take another question from Thomas McClay. There you are.
Suella Braverman says that multiculturalism has failed. I think in Manchester it's working. Does the panel agree with her, or is she wrong?
So Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, made a speech in the States on Tuesday in which she said multiculturalism has failed because it allowed people to come to our society and live parallel lives in it. She talked about the misguided dogma of multiculturalism. Tim.
Trouble with the word multiculturalism, everyone probably has a slightly different definition of it. But
how would you define it?
I don't know, but I would say Britain was probably one of the least racist societies on earth. You look at some of our intermarriage rates. The fact that we have, you know, an Asian Prime Minister, and no one seems to care. They don't like his politics or whatever, a lot of them, but they don't care the fact that he's a Hindu. We have huge success. Progress still needs to be made. We've seen the reports on cricket, etc. There are problem communities, I think, in Tower Hamlets, some northern cities, there's a lack of integration. But where I think she has a point is, and I think we need to be sort of slightly less parochial in some of our commentary, the President of France has recently talked about the fact that Europe cannot be the place which solves all of the world's misery. I think there are 700 million people who potentially be eligible for asylum in Britain. If we allow too much...
Yes, hang on. That figure, there are tricky things about that figure, because the UNHCR are saying, actually, if you added up all the people in the world that could possibly meet that definition, it could amount to 780 million. That's not to say that they all want to be refugees, and in fact, there are 35.3 million refugees worldwide, according to UNHCR, so that's nowhere near 780 million.
The number could absolutely be disputed, Fiona, but I think the point is, if we try to allow open borders, the multicultural settlement that we do have that I think is working in our country would be in danger. There's only a certain number of people you can take in a year if our schools, our housing system, our welfare system is to cope. If there isn't to be a backlash from local people. It's of great prize what we have in Britain, and actually control of immigration maintains that prize. We have a really valuable, orderly society in this country, and managing immigration, which no government is doing particularly well at the moment in any part of Europe, is very important. And that's where I think Suella has something we should listen to.
Wendy. Actually, how would you define multiculturalism?
It goes right back, I suppose, when I think about my modern studies days, but it's how communities interact together, but also how you add into the different cultures to make a culture that is completely unique. It's not about a monoculture, it's about those different communities coming together. But I mean, I'm old enough to remember Priti Patel standing up in Parliament to say that the Nationality and Borders Bill was going to sort everything in relation to migration, and that went really well. But it does feel like we're in a position where, just ahead of the Conservative Party conference, we've got Suella Braverman making a pitch for what comes after the next general election. And part of this is obviously to make the case for leaving the ECHR, where we would be like Russia. And that, I personally feel that that's exactly not where we want to be. And the reality is that the number that is right is nearly 180,000 people in the asylum backlog in August. And that's because we've got a Home Secretary and a government that's overseeing a system that is ineffective, expensive and morally indefensible.
OK, let's hear from our audience. There's a woman there. Actually, you've both got glasses. So the woman that side with the glasses, with the bob. Let's start with you.
I'm just wondering where everybody's going to be living, because I know for a fact that housing officers are not answering their phones because there is nowhere to put people. People are living in hotels. I have volunteers where I work, and her mum is in a hotel because she's lost the person who was sponsoring her, and she's worrying about her. But I'm thinking, I don't know what to say to you, because our own people have got nowhere either. You know, where is everybody going to go? We're a small island. You know, we just cannot do it. Where are all the houses being built? You know?
OK.
I don't see any.
And the woman next to you.
People have always migrated in times of hardship, and especially these days with climate change happening and wildfires and all the volcano activity, earthquake activity, people from the hotter climes are going to want to move to the cooler northern climes. And that has been throughout the eons, basically. But we need to have some sort of plan to be able to accommodate all these people. We can't just say, no, we've got to stop, our borders are full, we don't have enough infrastructure, we don't have enough housing. We need a plan to actually get that sorted for the future.
OK. So, Mark, Suella was saying uncontrolled immigration, inadequate integration, misguided dogma, multiculturalism. She also said the pace and scale of migration over recent years, so I presume she's referring to the Conservative government, has been too much too quick. And as you will know, the vast majority of migrants who come here are invited here with visas. So this is a government problem.
No, I think so. First of all, I mean, let's celebrate what a brilliant country we are. There's no wonder that people want to come to this country because we are a very open, welcoming, friendly group of people who get on very well together. And I think we should be celebrating that fact. It's no surprise to me that people want to come and live in the United Kingdom, but that is not.
But it doesn't sound like Suella's agreeing with you. Everyone's getting on so well.
I think
she thinks multiculturalism has failed.
We recognise that. There are challenges, though, to an open-door policy on immigration. We cannot be that open door and let everybody from the world in who wants to come here, because we are very popular and we're a great place to live. And I think
but
what
the
Home
government
Secretary...
doesn't do that, and no one is suggesting you should do that.
So what Suella was saying was, look, we need to have controlled migration, and there are challenges around the world which is going to make this very difficult. We are not the only country in the world that is wrestling with this problem, and we've got to work with our international partners. We've got to make sure that we find solutions to this on a global scale, and that cannot mean that we have open door immigration here in the UK. We've got to try and take the most vulnerable people, and we've got a very proud record of that in the United Kingdom. We've taken thousands of people from Syria, from Hong Kong, from Ukraine, where we've taken people who are under terrible circumstances.
But that is only 8% of the total. So it's just the thing I'm just slightly puzzled about is the Home Secretary is saying immigration is happening too much too fast, but the vast majority is because the Home Secretary, present and past, have invited these people in. No, what we have done is we've taken people from the most challenging places in the world. But the vast majority are not those. They've got jobs. They're on work visas.
Oh well, of course. I mean, of course, we're going to have immigration, and we have taken immigration.
That is immigration. And it's a record high.
And that's what we're celebrating: the fact that that multicultural system.
It sounds celebratory. It has failed.
No, I think what we're saying is it's a very nice place to come and live, and lots of people are going to want to come to the UK, but that is not an excuse for an open-door policy on immigration.
To be clear, though, Mark, to be clear, though, Mark, this is one of the biggest failures of the party we both support. We promised the British people we would control immigration, and we haven't. And I think the party will pay a heavy price for that.
Woman here in the black and white dress. We're just going to get the microphone to you. There you go.
Sorry. You're a welcoming country, but I believe your immigration is colour-coded because you named the Ukraine, rightly so, they were in war, but every nation you named don't look like me, anything beyond a certain colour, and you have an issue, including Suella Braverman, which I find in itself contradictory.
You've done a lot for the people of Hong Kong.
Again, they're not...
They don't look like you, but they're not white.
And what about Afghanistan?
But that's my point. My point is it's colour-coded. The darker it is, the less that happens. You welcome us in the Windrush.
I'm going to go around the panel.
I think, let's be clear, the irony of the fact that it is the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister who are of an ethnic background, I think it shouldn't be wasted upon us here. We are such an open country where we welcomed immigrants for decades, for generations.
Yeah, Windrush.
And that's what makes us so attractive.
That's
what makes us so attractive as a country. We are that open, welcoming country. There's no wonder people want to come here.
And then you lost all the papers and people got sent back from whence they came and ended up dying before you decided they were correct to be here to start with.
OK. Let me hear your point. I'll bring the rest of the panel in. Lisa. Do you agree? This is a question. Let's go back to it. Multiculturalism has failed, says Suella Braverman.
No, I don't. I mean, I grew up in this city in the 1980s. in the shadow of Enoch Powell with an Indian-born dad and a British-born mum. And when I heard our Home Secretary standing up this week talking about the children of foreign-born mothers, it took me right back to that era when families like ours were constantly under attack from Tory politicians, being told that we were the problem facing Britain. And I would just say to politicians like Suella, it was a gift to grow up in this city that has been shaped by waves of immigration over many centuries and has always provided a warm welcome to refugees fleeing persecution. It was a gift to grow up amongst friends who were black, who were white, who were from all sorts of ethnic minority backgrounds, and we never even noticed because it was just so normal. We were friends first and foremost, and we told a different story about the sort of country that we could be. And I would say to the government, if you're worried about integration and people not speaking English, why are you cutting English language classes so that there are huge waiting lists in every part of this country? If you're worried about people fleeing persecution, war, climate change, why did you abolish DFID and trash one of the best things that this country has ever been able to give to the world? If you're worried about the future of this country and people being able to have enough houses to live in, why is your house building programme falling off a cliff, and why have you presided over the loss of houses, including social housing stock, over 13 consecutive years? And if you're worried about asylum seekers in hotels, why aren't you processing asylum claims and getting a grip on the asylum system? The problem facing this country is not people like me or this lady here or our inability to understand one another. The problems facing this country have one cause and one cause alone: politicians like Suella Braverman and this Tory government.
And let me just ask you, Lisa. So, total net migration to the UK on the last figure was 606,000. It's a record high. Is Labour happy with that number?
It's an absurd question, and I'll tell you why. Because for 37 consecutive seasons in a row, the Tories had a net migration target and failed to meet it, and in the end they just abolished it altogether. You know why? Because last year immigration increased significantly because we decided to fulfil our obligations to people in Hong Kong, and because Vladimir Putin took illegal action in a war against Ukraine, and the British people opened their homes and their hearts to Ukrainians, and the government rightly let them in. That's why you have to have a much smarter debate about immigration. We want to see this country playing our part with others in a proper system, international system, where we give a welcome to people fleeing persecution and do our bit. And we want to see our immigration system tied to skills, so that instead of saying to other countries, skill up your young people and we'll just pinch them to come and fill labour shortages here, we invest in young people here so that they can get those jobs in our hospitals, our schools, our care homes that they so badly want and need, and so that we don't end up in this false divide between people from overseas and people here. We can invest in our young people, we can get a grip on our immigration system, but we can't do it with these sorts of nonsense debates that we've had to put up with from the Tories for far too long.
I mean, it's ironic, isn't it, if you're the Home Secretary and you go abroad to give a speech, basically, and trash your own government's record on something. It just doesn't seem, and sort of testing out lines for a future leadership election, that's more Tim's area to comment on. I think my reflection would be, I mean, it'd be wrong for a business person and someone who represents businesses in the north of England not to say, actually, that business people want immigration in a managed way, and that means that we shouldn't count students in the immigration target that the government has. They count students in those numbers, but they come here and they go home again. But we still count them as if they're... Because that's not migration, as far as I'm concerned. And they're not putting strain on housing stock. They're living in purpose-built accommodation in the city centre of Manchester. And the reflection I would give is that if we want to build more houses, I'm afraid to say construction workers are one of those things we could really do with, actually, some help with bringing people in from other parts of Europe and the world. And that is a legitimate thing, that we are very short of certain skills, right, on certain projects. And so I would reflect on the fact that I think we get into a massive confusion and a muddle between what we need in terms of legal migration and the very legitimate challenges around our asylum system. And the two just get completely confused. And the Home Secretary is deliberately doing that, right? Yeah. Because she wants you to feel that this is people breaking the rules, that migrants are people that aren't playing by the rules. the vast majority, as you said as chair of this panel, right, are here completely legally. They've done nothing wrong. Yet we behave as if these people are not playing by the rules they are. And I think on the multiculturalism question, I didn't want to let it pass without actually saying, we should be massively proud of this audience tonight, of the type of society Manchester the North is. I live in Bradford, one of the most diverse cities in the country, one of the youngest cities in the country, and I'm immensely proud of the type of society that I live in and the one that I'm part of. And I find it really upsetting that this issue is used in the way it is to try and divide people, because the immigration and asylum system is really contentious and difficult public policy. You've got to have a meaningful and sensible debate. And Suella Braverman has gone after students, she's gone after universities, she's gone after lots of groups in British society that she thinks are sort of easy targets where she can score a quick victory. And I do worry that actually on something like, for instance, on gay people in Afghanistan, this government brought gay people to this country. And that speech, she also had a go at that as well. And it's like, I'm immensely proud that when the Western Alliance was falling, we thought to bring with Stonewall gay people to this city. 500,000 people were at Pride in Manchester. Yeah. So whether it's the diversity that Lisa was rightly talking about around ethnicity and around where people come from, or whether it's people's sexual orientation, I think we should be absolutely proud of the sort of city Manchester is. It's a global city and it has a population to match. And that's just what it should be like.
So she absolutely did not say that. Actually, if you listen to the words she actually said, I think most people would agree with her. I can quote exactly what she said. She said, there are vast swathes of the world where it is extremely difficult to be gay or to be a woman. Where individuals are being persecuted, it is right that we offer sanctuary. Yep. They're exactly the words
not
of
where
the
they're
Home
discriminated
Secretary.
against.
And the other thing is, Fiona, is
that's what she was
those numbers
saying.
are actually 2% of the overall total.
Exactly.
So it's another dead cat, frankly, trying to point in that direction.
But to try and insinuate that she was having a go at gay people is completely factually incorrect.
She was trying to pretend that people can just come here and say that they're gay and get granted asylum, and that is not the case. You don't just have to prove
she was making the argument that open door immigration doesn't work.
You have a well-founded fear of persecution. But what's she arguing against? This is her system, and she doesn't even understand it. I mean, it's just absurd. Honestly, I think your government thinks that we just are too stupid to see through this. But after 13 years, I can tell you that we're not.
About 30 seconds left. We'll take one more thing from the audience. Yes. The woman there in the check shirt. Yes.
I know, not first-hand, but my mum, she works for Stockport Council, and she's dealt with the asylum seekers. And the one thing that not necessarily frustrates her is the contract that's been awarded to Serco, when her and the rest of her team have to deal with putting everything in place for them, and why the contract hasn't just been awarded to the local councils. So it's better for them to be put into the community, because she's done community cohesion for like the past 10 years in the deprived areas of Stockport, like Brennington and Bridge Hall and places like that. So she knows the background, but then the contract's been awarded to a private company that don't have anything to do with the community, when we've got to try and put these people into the community.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for your point. Okay, we're out of time. This is one of those programmes where you could go on so much longer, but I'm afraid we can't. Our hour is up. Just to remind you, if you can't stay up late till this time on BBC One, you can always see us on the iPlayer at 8 o'clock every week. Thank you very much to Jenny Harrison and Jade Hanley for supplying the photographs under here and showing everybody where we are, these lovely pictures of Sale. Next week, we'll see you in Wolverhampton. Don't forget, if you want to come and be in the audience, go to the Question Time website. We would love to see you. But from the panel, from our great audience here in Sale in Greater Manchester, thanks for being here and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Discover unique stories,